While Buffalo Roamed, The Wild Western Days of Colorado, Episode 7. The Western Frontier and its settlement. The stories of the wild days of the West were as popular then as they are today. There's something romantic and tragic about this rough country. The plains and mountains, the rivers and valleys, the native inhabitants trying to protect their existence, and the brave men and women who risked everything to start anew in an unknown wilderness. These are the stories of Frontier Colorado, while Buffalo roamed. Today will sound like a Denver story, but in truth, it's a Colorado story. The listener will hear about the forming of the first towns by the 58ers, first attempts at settlement of the western edge of the Kansas Territory, the dawn of modern Colorado. We will explore a sad and lonely stone and concrete marker fenced off from the world. This marks the location of long-abandoned Arapahoe City. Grant Frontier Park in South Denver, near Englewood, is where Montana City thrived for a season. Confluence Park in downtown Denver, at the junction of Cherry Creek and the South Fork of the Platte River, is the location of both Auraria and Denver City. Auraria is now a suburb of Denver. Denver, of course, the capital of Colorado, and its proudest city. The hopeful 58ers made towns at all three locations. 4 towns total. One remains today, Denver. You can visit the 3 locations easily. The plots have been miraculously preserved. But be warned, pee before you go. The 2 parks are lovely, but the porta potties, each park has one, are just plain frightening, almost otherworldly. The plot of Earth, the area we call Denver today, was said to be quite beautiful in its natural form before our rough treatment. Progress, it's called. Of course, there were 2 watercourses, the South Fork of the Platte River and the mouth of Cherry Creek. That's where it enters the river. This confluence was a meeting place, a camping spot, by the travelers and the Arapahoe and Cheyenne. There was a road along the creek, and there was a road along the river. The creek road ended at the Platte, then crossed there, and the road continued on, north to Fort Larimer. South you could reach Garden of the Gods, and further, Pueblo, the Santa Fe Trail, New Mexico. There was good pasture, obviously plenty of water, wood, a beautiful vista with Pike's Peak south and Long's Peak to the north, also gorgeous mountains between with glimpses of those titans along the Continental Divide. This popular camping spot had a cabin built by a trapper, John Smith, who worked with William McGaw, alias Jack Jones. It served as a trading post. The 2 trapper traders were mentioned in the last episode. So we have a cabin in the area. When the Georgia party arrived at the confluence on June 24th, 1858, and a member of their party also built a cabin, and this was kind of like their base. But apparently, nation building was not on William Greenberry Russell's mind. Gold was, and they were finding it, spreading out on the move that summer. The well-known camping spot would not be the site for the first town. The Lawrence party, or most of them, arrived at Cherry Creek in August and mingled with the Russell party. Ultimately, though, they end up working/panning back up the Platte, southward, and about 6 miles up, they hit on some gold worth stopping for. Lawrence party members and some of the Georgians had a nice mining camp going. The camp grew to a town, Montana, laid out on the east side of the Platte, now Grant Frontier Park, South Denver, Englewood area. Specifically, the southwest section of the intersection of West Evans Avenue and South Santa Fe Drive. Side note, my wife and I just visited Grant Frontier Park. Here are my notes from that morning. High, steep banks as far as can be seen except for right here where the town was. Did they make it this way, or did They plant here because the land was more favorable with regards to working near the water. Hard to work up a bank that steep. Wonderful bridge with parking for the park on both sides. You can see the buildings of Denver from here about halfway across the bridge. Tall trees line the west side of the river. A man photographing a blue plate seems anxious. There is a lot of concrete work here. Many paths, overgrown a bit. Been very wet here lately. Nice place to swim your dog. River is peaceful and very quiet. Evidence, river encroaches on sidewalk occasionally. Pretty area further south. Maybe cabins were there and not on the road. Santa Fe Drive / Can-Am Highway is running just east along the water. An ancient trail underneath it for sure. Nice playground, and park is pretty. Would send a child to the river or into the weeds before entering that bathroom. End of side note. The following letter was written by a member of the Lawrence Party, Captain Smith, and was republished in the Council Bluffs Nonpareil, November 22, 1858. Quote, on the evening of the 2nd of September, the Lawrence Party pitched, quote, permanent camp on the eastern bank of the South Platte River, 8 miles above the mouth of Cherry Creek, 150 miles from Fort Laramie, and 100 about from Fort Leavenworth, 10 from the base of the Rocky Mountains, 90 miles from Pike's Peak, and 61 miles from where the Platte leaves the mountains. Prospecting parties immediately commenced operations, and in a few days so successful were we that to ourselves and to each other we said, Alabama, here we rest. The city of Montana was laid out, and preparations were being made to go into winter quarters, when Billy, myself, and 3 others, on the 2nd of September, started our return. At that time there were not over 100 men in the mines. Half of these were at work, making, with no other utensils than those of the most rude and primitive construction, from $2 to $3 per day. In our wanderings of 2,500 miles over Mexico, Utah, Nebraska, and Kansas, we found nothing so good as this. We found gold, not at Pike's Peak, but on the head of the Colorado, the Rio Grande, the Arkansas, and the Platte, but nothing on which we could rely so well as this. All the gold we found was washed, or, quote, scale gold. Evidently, therefore, it is washed from the deposits not yet discovered, the discoverers of which will have all they need, and the discovery is not very far off. Had there been 500 men instead of 47 to prospect the country as it should and will be prospected, richer mines by far than these must be found. The climate will speak in this for itself. During the whole trip, not 5 doses of medicine were taken, and nobody felt like taking it in the whole train. And you may be sure that my brown cheeks and hard muscles lost nothing by comparison with the flabby limbs and cadaverous, ague, pinched faces we meet here on our return. Elk, deer, antelope, jackrabbits, and mountain sheep, and black and brown bear abound, and to vary the exercises, now and then a grizzly. End quote. Another letter from Montana 3 days later, written in German from H. Murat to a business associate. H. Murat, Montana, on the South Platte, November 5, 1858. Friend Zilhard, on Thursday morning, November 3rd, we arrived here, all in good health. The whole journey was more a pleasure trip than anything else. We had most beautiful and pleasant weather the whole trip, with the exception of 2 thunderstorms, which troubled us somewhat. The last day we ascended to the height of about 6,000 feet above Kansas City. My wife is well and getting fat. She looks as blooming and fresh as a maiden. So well has the free air of the prairies agreed with her. Yesterday myself, Philip, and a young man from Westport felled the trees for our cabin in 6 hours, and today we hauled them with our oxen, and tomorrow we shall have the cabin done and ready for occupancy. My dear friend, it is the most lovely country you ever saw. To our right there is a range of mountains where the Platte River emerges. It must be a most beautiful sight in the summer. Gold is found everywhere you stick your shovel, paying from 5 cents to 10 cents to the pan while prospecting, and there is no doubt it will pay from $10 to $20 per day to the man. As I remarked before, gold is here plenty, and as soon as spring makes its appearance, the whole world will be in a blaze of astonishment at the riches that will be taken out of the earth. For this winter we cannot think of mining, because we have to finish our house for shelter this winter. This done, we shall begin hunting to get fresh meat. Our oxen we want for other purposes, but when spring comes, we shall be in for the gold. Yesterday 110 men arrived from Nebraska. We count now, all told, 250 men. 30 wagons are expected in every day. My Frau is the first white woman out here and will make money by washing clothes, which will pay her perhaps 50 cents apiece. You must at any rate come out here. You can make your fortune as a shoemaker. But come soon, because every day you lose will be a pity. I shall send you some gold before you start, and I want you to bring me out some things, such as flour, etc., etc. The last named article is selling here at $15 per sack, which is cheap, what it will be soon. Yours truly, H. Murat, end quote. So in early November, Montana is being settled, cabins erected for winter. Now we go back to the Confluence for a moment. To tell this story right, it should go in correct order. And if we back up just a little bit to September, around a month after the Lawrence party arrived, a town site named St. Charles, 640 acres, on the east side of Cherry Creek was drawn out, and a town company formed, all totally legal. Only one problem: nobody lived there. Nobody built there. By the time the letter from Mr. Murat was written, the Lawrence party, not living in Montana, had left or was about to leave for the winter. They were all out on the road. Side note: there was an unfinished cabin on the land adjacent to the St. Charles town site. It is accepted that a man named Hank Way built this structure, a roofless cabin, to be used as a blacksmith shop. Hold that thought. End of side note. So in October, a chunk of the Lawrence party is heading home, taking the north route, which they were told about, and went 5 days without food. Anyhow, while they were en route to the States, they met another party on the road, heading the other direction to Cherry Creek. It makes the town makers nervous, so they send a man, Charles Nichols, back to protect and hold the town site, which he agrees to do. The town's named for him, St. Charles. Meanwhile, on the west side of Cherry Creek, the Georgians are beginning to think longer term, and William Russell organizes the Auraria Town Company at the end of October, the name copied from a Georgian mining town in Lumpkin County where they were from, now a ghost town. The town laid out north, south, east, west, pretty typical. Henry Allen, a surveyor and politician, supervising. There were already cabins built there by then, more for protection than thinking about a city, but there was a street, and they called it Indian Row, where McGaw and Smith and the Rookers, who were renegade Mormons, had built. As we know from the last episode, the leader of the Georgia party, William Greenberry Russell, had already left for home, met by the Larimer party on the way. By November 16th, when the Lecompton and Leavenworth parties arrived at the Confluence, there were maybe 20 cabins under construction, a few completed. Here's a letter from Auraria from a member of the Leavenworth party, M. Jewett. Auraria, November 18th, 1858. We arrived here on the evening of the 16th, after a very pleasant journey. This place is situated on the junction of the Platte and Cherry Creek, about 12 miles from the mountains. I went up to Montana, a place about 30 log houses, 6 miles above here on the Platte. Found Buell and company, also most of the Lawrence boys. Whitsett and I are going to build at Montana, Lawrence and Dorset at Auraria. It is estimated there are almost 600 men within 15 miles of this place, scattered along the river. As I am lying on the ground, riding on a saddle skirt, by the light of our campfire, I have not time to write in detail. Mr. Green of Salt Lake Valley will bring you this. He starts early in the morning. If I had a small stock of well-selected goods with me, I could coin money this winter. Whiskey is $8 per gallon. Coffee and sugar, 50 cents per pound. Gun caps, 50 cents per box, and everything else in the same proportion. We have every assurance that there is gold here. Mr. Turner of Lawrence Party thinks that with water in the spring one can make $10 to $20 per day. Those who are washing now are making from $2 to $5 per day. We will have an express from Larimer every month. Yours truly, M.M. Jewett. End quote. Another couple days later, George Seville. Quote, Auraria City, Cherry Creek, November 20th, 1858. We arrived safely here, making the trip in 42 days. We have a house built for winter quarters and have each got a share in the city. We are unable this winter, as the weather has begun to cold, but the cold is here and no mistake. They are now digging along the South Platte. I wouldn't take $1,000 for my lots in this town. I would send you a specimen of the gold, but we have not been able to mine as yet. Farewell, George Seville. End quote. Between Auraria and Montana, it was thought that one would certainly outstrip the other. In fact, Montana was more promising entering winter. By mid-November, there were 20 to 30 cabins erected. Auraria had fewer at that time in November. The last of the four main parties arrives November 16th. The Leavenworth and Lecompton parties combined. General William Larimer, the leader of the Leavenworth party, appointed treasurer of the new Arapahoe County, along with the members of the Lecompton party who were also officers in the new county of Arapahoe. These gentlemen were charged with locating a town site, a county seat. When they arrived, there were 2 towns already that they could see, actually 3. St. Charles was being guarded by Nichols, but still no cabin and no Nichols. The day the Larimers arrived, they crossed Cherry Creek, and now they were in Auraria and made camp under a large cottonwood tree. That night, seizing the moment, the general grabs a blanket and some provisions and slips out of camp, leaving instructions for his son H.H. to meet him with the rest of their gear across the creek over on the east side. A 17-year-old H.H. wakes up at daybreak, reads the note and follows his dad's instructions and packs up. He gets their wagon badly stuck in the creek, and after quite a struggle he frees the wagon and finds his father, who has made a fire for them to warm themselves. It was mid-November, and both men had been in the creek that day. The general had decided that this location was best for a town site, and he had crossed 4 logs indicating a foundation. Just on the other side of the creek, though, was William McGaw, or Jack Jones, it's his alias, who was hired by Nichols and the other town members to hold the property, he being a shareholder himself. Interesting. Where Charles Nichols was is anybody's guess. Probably in Montana City. Where else would he have been? But why did Jack Jones not stop or suspend or inform Larimer about St. Charles? Well, nobody knows for sure. Then there was the Hank Way cabin, the proposed blacksmith shop. Nobody on the ground at that time knew about its origins. It was assumed that that unfinished cabin had something to do with the Nichols claim, St. Charles, but it was a quarter a mile away from the St. Charles proposed town site. Nobody claimed it, no Hank Way returned, and it was never used as a blacksmith shop. Where was Nichols, and what about Jack Jones? As mentioned, the 640-acre town site was drawn up, and in fact was turned into the capital, Lecompton, Kansas Territory. Where was Nichols? Still no trouble with Jack Jones either. The Denver Town Company is formed on November 25th. E.P. Stout was president, the treasurer, General Larimer, and one of the directors, William McGaw, alias Jack Jones. 41 men total in the company. They stake out about 2,200 acres, and then a little later back it off to 1,280 acres. Colonel S.S. Curtis, who was one of the founders of the next town we're going to discuss, Arapahoe City, had some experience as a civil engineer. He was assisted by James Lowry and H. Larimer. They located the streets and lots with a rope for a, quote, chain. Each member of the town company each had a number of lots, and they had to build to hold their lots. Meetings were held. This was a very small community, so where was Nichols? And what about Jack Jones, other than the fact that now, suddenly he's a member of the Denver City Town Company? In early December, there is a notation regarding the, quote, handling of the Nichols claim, end quote. Larimer wrote, quote, "We could have beat him, but it could have held us up for some time, so we gave him and 4 associates shares," end quote. So Charles Nichols, who was sent back to guard the town site, was unable to get any help building a single cabin, and who was unable or not present to stop Larimer. He gets shares for himself and the other members of the St. Charles Town Company without any labor. Then he leaves the area and heads for the States, quote, in disgust. He does return the following spring. Jack Jones ends up with 5 prominent streets that he gets to name: Wazee, Wewata, Champa, Magaw, Glenarm. And what did they do to get this honor? We know Magaw was a buddy to the Larimers and a guide for James Denver while in the area a few years back. James Denver, territorial governor. Oops, wait. James Denver was no longer the territorial governor when the city was named for him. He resigned October 10th. Over a month had gone by Denverless in Lecompton. Nobody knew it, thus no advantage was gained by naming the town Denver. Mr. Denver visited the town only once. It is written that the name Denver was the unanimous favorite from the beginning, yet there is evidence to the contrary. H. Larimer claims that he was finishing a letter one evening and his father came home from a town company meeting. He looked at the letter and noticed the return address said Golden, Kansas Territory. General Larimer said to him, quote, "No, son, now it's Denver City. We just decided that," end quote. Here is James Denver's recollection. A letter from Mr. James Denver to H. Larimer. Washington, D.C., November 14th, 1890. Dear Sir, your letter of November 11, with enclosures, has just overtaken me here, and I proceeded at once to comply with your request to give you some account of the naming of the city of Denver in Colorado. While I was governor of Kansas Territory, in July 1858, a report came to the settlement that gold had been discovered at Pike's Peak. At that time, the territory of Kansas extended westward to the summit of the Rocky Mountains, and the first territorial legislature had divided it all into counties as far west as a line running north and south in the neighborhood of the mouth of the Smoky Hill Fork of the Kansas River, and all beyond that line was designated as Arapahoe County. Arapahoe County was also organized by the first territorial legislature and a full set of county officers appointed, but they had all left the country, and at the beginning of 1858 there was probably not a white man in it. The report of the discovery of gold produced great commotion, and quite a number of companies were at once organized to explore the country and engage in mining. One day, while looking at some of the men breaking mules near my office in Lecompton, it occurred to me that here was quite a crowd of people going out into a new country where there were no laws or officers to administer or enforce the laws, and that there was a danger of difficulties occurring out there similar to those that we had just experienced in Kansas, and which we were then greatly gratified at having overcome and quieted. I examined the laws and ascertained that Arapahoe County had been organized as above stated, that the officers had all abandoned it, and the organic act of Congress organizing the territory of Kansas had made it the duty of the governor to fill all vacancies in office where not otherwise provided by law, And here was a case directly to the point. So I at once appointed a full set of county officers for Arapahoe County from among those gentlemen who I knew were going out there. For county judge, I appointed H.P.A. Smith, an old California friend and native of Maine. For sheriff, Edward Wynkoop. For county treasurer, General Larimer. The names of the others I believe I have forgotten. They proceeded out towards the foot of the Rocky Mountains and learned that the place where the gold was discovered was in Cherry Creek, a tributary of the South Fork of the Platte River about 70 or 75 miles north of Pike's Peak, and to that point they directed their course. There being no county seat for Arapahoe County, it became the duty of these officers to locate it, so they laid out a town just below the mouth of Cherry Creek and did me the honor to name it after me. This is about the whole story. Very respectfully, J.W. Denver." End quote. Wynkoop, the sheriff, leaves December 1st, heads back to the States with the Denver Town Company paperwork, and when he arrives, suddenly he's no longer dealing with James Denver. And guess what? Sorry, buddy, there's already a town site there. It's called St. Charles. Denied. Not sure how that conversation went after that, but possession being 9/10 of the law and all, Denver City carries on. And by the time Wynkoop gets back, the town of St. Charles is long gone. It's Denver City, baby, and it stayed that way. Also, at the end of November, Colonel S.S. Curtis, he was mentioned earlier, locates and builds the first cabin in Arapahoe City, named after a negative encounter with Arapahoe braves insisting that the travelers leave this land at once. They did not, and a few cabins were erected. Some 58ers wintered and mined there. Today, if leaving Golden, Colorado on 44th Avenue, in Golden it's called 10th Street, heading east, before McIntyre and the sports bar at the corner, and after some serious electrical equipment, there is a lonely, sad tribute, a monument, hidden behind a chain-link fence. It reads in part, quote, "Arapahoe City, Pioneer Placer Mining Camp, the earliest town in Jefferson County. Town Company organized November 29, 1858. Named for the Arapahoe Indians." End quote. There is actually more written, but it's very hard to read, and I'm going to save it for later, because a couple of characters are mentioned that deserve a better introduction than an almost illegible copper plate mounted on a smooth stone with mortar set up that's too far from the road. There is evidence that the area was mined in the 1830s also, but the winter of 1858 there were just a few cabins there, a handful of residents, also members of the Denver City Town Company, spending time in both locations. There was no road to get there, and it was 15 miles from Denver City, bushwhacking the whole way, and at one point crossing over what is now Sloan's Lake. At that time it was dry land. The town would last until 1863, rivaling Golden for the Jefferson County seat. The last remaining structure burned down in 1912. Nothing remains but the bronze marker placed there by the Colorado Historical Society in 1946. This marker is so sad behind that fence. The tablet is so far back you can barely read it. I never felt so bad for a historical monument. And that's Arapahoe City. Back at the Confluence, Denver and Auraria were bitter rivals at first. Auraria clearly the more populated city during the remainder of 1858, and by far. Keep in mind there was money at stake. A town company member had lots and a monetary interest in the whole town too, so if anybody moved to Auraria, for instance, bought there, town company members did well. It was advantageous to promote the town and hope that newcomers would choose, say, Auraria over Denver, Montana, or Arapahoe. Side note, notes from a trip to Confluence Park. A large apartment building called the Confluence borders the park on the east side. You can mentally mark the location by this apartment building that sits away, north, of the rest of the Denver skyline. The creek is clean, about 20 feet wide, sand-bottomed. An area at the actual confluence of Cherry Creek and the South Fork of the Platte is almost beach-like. There is a concrete path on each side of the creek. Bicycles on the Auraria side, and walkers and runners on the Denver City side. I got this wrong and was told so. Twice. More ducks than people, was not crowded, and the restroom was as scary as the one at Grant Frontier Park. No mountain views down at creek level. An escape from the city. Quiet at the Platte. Over 3 million people live in the Denver metro area today, and that's about half of Colorado's population. In June of 1858, when the Russell Party from Georgia arrived, 107 strong, the settled population was just about zero. The 58ers came here for adventure, naturally, but also to be the first in line for a new gold rush. The rumors and samples brought back to the, quote, states enticed the ready, willing, and able to form parties and head west fast. First comers get the pick of the litter, whether they were after gold, industry, farming and ranching, business, or city building. It was first come, first serve. In 1858, then, there were 3 towns running at once, and one more on paper only, while 6 months earlier there was 0. It was then, and it is still, the most populated portion of the state. When the 58ers arrived, there was barely any gold, but interest was still high. A special plot of land, I guess. And hope floats, just like the gold was doing. Thrilling times for these brave men and women. The threat of tribal rebuke was always there. This was Arapahoe and Cheyenne land, and they didn't care much if a mining camp and a county was named after them. We now, in our larger story, have towns. We have structures. The 58ers are cutting our road and future. We acknowledge these first settlements physically, with a couple parks and a lonely marker behind a chain-linked fence. And friends, at least we have that. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. And if you're in the Denver area, why not take your kids or your pets to these parks? See the history. I'm telling you, it'll make your love for this state stronger. We have so much in common with the pioneers. And to see what they saw intentionally makes a difference. A true introduction to the past. Best wishes, and thanks again. See you in a couple Sundays with a new story about the frontier days of Colorado while buffalo roamed. This is J.B. Reynolds, copyright 2025.